Thank y'all for having me. You get me in full West Texas regalia. I'm out here for one last trip before the election, where it's nice and cool in the 50s. So, and quick, quick talking points about me. I grew up in Brownwood, Texas. My family's been ranching in that part of the state since shortly after the Civil War. I ran away to law school, as Mike was saying, and have spent most of my career working in the cities doing business litigation, but also working on a variety of issues I really care about, like reproductive rights. I co-founded Jane's Due Process, which is a legal services organization for Texas teens and preteens facing unplanned pregnancies. So I've worked on some pretty horrific cases involving some very young kids that I think about a lot these days now that Roe v. Wade's been stricken down and abortion banned in Texas. I've also worked on voting rights as with the 2020 election cycle, representing Harris County in the dozens of lawsuits that Republicans filed against them every time they try to make it easier and safer to vote during a pandemic. And as mentioned, got into cannabis law several years ago, and it was that experience of working on the hemp bill and realizing that the Republicans in the legislature really don't like Sid Miller. I mean, I was asked to come up with, quote, safeguards against Sid in the bill, which we wrote into law, and most of which is. And then I watched the open graft and corruption going on in that office. It was up to and including being interviewed by a Texas Ranger in the investigation that led to Sid Miller's political consultant being indicted for trying to sell $100 hemp license for tens of thousands of dollars. One issue about this office that really intrigued me and made me want to run is the State Office of Rural Health is there. And since the pandemic broke, my husband and I kind of fled the city and headed out to Alpine, where we have some land. And this county, Brewster County, shares one hospital with two other counties. There's only 25 beds and 3 ventilators. So I spent the pandemic very nervously looking for outbreaks or the stats because we had nowhere to go. The hospital was going to fill up in a split second, and it did at times. Miller began the last legislative session wanting to cut funding to that rural hospital program and the Meals on Wheels program, which enraged the very right-wing Republican chair of the Finance Committee. I mean, he's just awful. Quick things about the Ag Commission: 80% of the budget is Meals on Wheels and school lunches. So though we associate it with rural Texas, it has a lot to do with urban areas as well. I think of it as all about food, where we grow it, growing it in a healthy manner, getting healthy food to people, because that makes for healthy people, whether it's school kids or the elderly or people with disabilities. It also ties into climate change, how we grow our ag. Sustainable agriculture matters and is something Miller doesn't believe really exists. And one other horrific thing about Miller is he's flat on kind of QAnon. The first day of the January 6th hearings, he held a screening of that 2000 Mules movie, which spreads lies about the 2020 election, with Sidney Powell, the completely soon to be disbarred, I suspect, lawyer who pushed the legal theory that led to the attempted insurrection. Miller also carried I'll have to back up and say, when I first ran for this, I thought abortion would not be an issue in the race, but it has become one, in part because Miller carried the 2011 so-called sonogram bill, which I always called the Give a Little Tart a Lecture bill. And coincidentally, I was the local counsel on the constitutional challenge to that case that the Center for Reproductive Rights brought. Back to the campaign trail, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And this race may be one of the most winnable ones because it turns out nobody likes Sid Miller. As I've been talking to really conservative agricultural trade associations, they can't stand him. I recently announced the endorsement of 3 former Texas Supreme Court justices, Deborah Hankinson, Craig Enoch, and former Chief Justice Tom Phillips, who were delighted to endorse me because they all believe in democracy and in good government, and that's a real common ground we had and shared that Miller does not. So that's kind of the spiel on who I am, what this office is about, how this race is shaping up. I did do a poll that we got late last week, which showed walking in the door, 2/3 of the voters have no idea who we are, and I'm about 6 points back. But once people learn about us, I'd shoot up 14 points. So it's very much a winnable race if we get the word out about it.